The beach at Salle Park is alive with the sounds of the majestic trumpeter swan as the huge flock spends the winter along the shoreline despite the unusually harsh winter. These birds are somewhat of a miracle because less than 100 years ago, the trumpeter swan was considered practically extinct in North America.
So this is one of the great conservation comeback stories in the province. Trumpeter swans were native to Ontario. They're the biggest swan in the world, and they were hunted out of existence. They were hunted for their meat, their feathers, and even the leather of their feet. The last trumpeter swan in Ontario was shot in 1886 in Long Point. And for many, many years, almost 100 years, they didn't exist in the province.
The species was reintroduced to Ontario in 1982 by Harry Lumsden, a retired Ministry of Natural Resources biologist, who brought eggs back from a flock of trumpeter swans in Alaska, and slowly, over many years, the trumpeter swans have begun to re-establish their territory across the province. One of these territories is the marina at Salle Park in Burlington.
The amazing thing about Salle Park is we have 1/4 of Ontario's trumpeter swan population staying here during the winter. That's about 200 swans. That's the largest congregation of trumpeter swans. Oh, listen to them. That's the largest congregation of trumpeter swans anywhere in Ontario. Now, in the summer, they pair off and they go off to private nesting areas in northern Ontario. But during the winter, they congregate because that's when all the social stuff happens. That's when the young swans are trying to figure out who's who, when they're trying to find their mates. And when the swans that are about ready to leave the nest are starting to, branch away from their parents. So all kinds of social things happen at this time of year, and that's why the swans come together.
In a typical winter, or swan social season, Salle Park is an ideal place for swans to gather, even though it's not the warmest place to live.
Traditionally, trumpeter swans wouldn't have stayed this far north in the winter. They would have gone down to the eastern seaboard of the United States and stayed in large open marshes that were in areas that were warm enough that they don't freeze over. Unfortunately, due to habitat loss, there are very few of those kinds of marshes left. And so the swans here, they're just reestablishing their migration routes. They got here. This bay normally does not freeze over during the winter. So this is kind of an unusual event. As you know, it's been a very cold winter this year. So normally they are able to access food. The wave action in the bay keeps the water open for them. There's a really good source of aquatic vegetation here. And so normally they can feed quite happily here all through the winter.
The Trumpeter Swan Coalition is working towards protecting and encouraging the trumpeter swan population to reestablish itself fully in the province. One of the ways they are encouraging this is to band and identify as many swans as possible so that their migrations can be tracked. While it looks like these swans are being fed for fun, it's actually to help the swans get their identification stress-free.
The Trumpeter Swan Restoration Group uses corn as a lure, and that brings the swans to them. It gets them used to being around people. So when they go to handle them, when they go to band them, and when they go to tag them, and also they even take blood from them from time to time, when they do those things, the swans don't panic. They're used to being around people. So if you ever see it happening here, it's very calm. The other swans will continue feeding right around the swan that's getting banded or tagged. In the States and a lot of other places where they're working with swans, they have to drop nets on them. There's panic, there's stress. There's no stress or panic in these birds because they're used to working with the people. We don't advocate people feeding them in general. And I've seen people feeding a lot of inappropriate things like hot dog buns, so we discourage that. But baiting and banding is just part of the program in working with the swans.
There are actually two kinds of swans wintering at Salle Park. The indigenous trumpeter swans that are easily identified by their long black beaks, black legs, and black feet, and the mute swan with an orange bill, who are not indigenous to the province. The Trumpeter Swan Coalition is working towards helping the trumpeter swan become once again well established in areas throughout the province. To find out more about the Trumpeter Swan Reintroduction Program, check out the Ontario Trumpeter Coalition's Facebook page. In Salle Park in Burlington, I'm Michelle Gaetian for Halton Insider.